Hello, Wapplers from around the world. My name is Mark One on the forum, and we're happy you joined us today. Today we have John Stanton from the UK, who is in Tom Rigg, also from the UK, who are Wappler experts. And we're going to have an open question and answer session. And the first thing I'm going to do is ask everybody to starting from A to Z in your first name, introduce yourself. Who's A? Curtis, I think you're up.
My name is Curtis Bell from Nyack, New York in the United States. Been using the product for about 3 months now, doing a proof of concept on a system that's going to be used by the major pharmaceutical companies.
Awesome. Who's next? Jesse?
My name is Brian Hall. I'm from St. Pete, Florida, in the U.S. I am new to Wappler. I'm coming from web development, and my job is an HR operations manager, but my background is in marketing and front end development for our sites. But I'm looking to use Wappler to build an HR platform similar to Bamboo HR. We've built this out complete and powered platform with a lot of automation and integrations, API integrations that make it pretty powerful. However, the problem I found is I can't really operate as a software as a service. So I need something where I can control the code, I can control the deployment, the testing, everything. And I think this is a great tool. I've looked at many others out systems and Bubble, many other, but they don't have the both sides of it where you can control the whole workflow and the code and everything else. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about it and see if we can achieve what we're trying to do.
All right. Thank you. Baron, can you say hi? How about Jesse?
Hi, I'm Christian from Germany, Berlin. And I'm fairly new to the product, and I'm just evaluating and testing if it will fit for a small IT company. I write with 9 people, and we are doing some native development with Zojo and FileMaker, and also some web stuff. And we want to improve our CI/CD pipeline and want to be better and faster for small customers.
Awesome. Thank you. Scott?
Hey, I'm Scott Clee. I'm based in London. I checked today and Wappler tells me that I've been paying a subscription for 2 years. So I've been using it for 2 years. Apologies, this is my first time in this meetup. I have been fully intending to attend for a while, but I'm glad I finally made it. I use Wappler to build web apps for private clients. Wappler, for me, just really accelerates delivery and development, and the freedom you get in deployment really puts it above many of the other no-code platforms that are out there. The fact you're not tied into any specific ecosystem is great for some of the clients I work with. I've built some tools that I use to complement Wappler, and I shared one of those yesterday on the community forum, and so I'm happy to kind of talk more about that at any point as well.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom from Northeast England, just up the road from Brian English, aka the Scud Father. We've been developing in-house for my company since I think 1996. Mainly on in-house application development. We run about 7 or 8 websites right now. Originally started off with Sausage Software, Hot Dog editor, if anybody remembers that, 1997 or 98, I think it was. Over the years, we're progressing Adobe Suite, Adobe products, Dreamweaver. Frustrated very much with the lack of support. But when looking at the marketplace, there wasn't anything else around about that time that could really do what we wanted to achieve. And then all of a sudden, Wappler came onto the horizon. And since then, I think we were quite late adopters. We adopted about 3 years ago. Since then, we've noticed a much smoother route to our workflow to release what we need to use for our business. So we're currently in the process of updating 7 or 8 of our own internal websites, converting everything across to Node.js and mainly .NET. So that keeps us out of trouble and keeps us in the forum all the time.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Anybody else like to say anything? Introduce themselves, rather? Well, since I'm the host of the meetup, that means that I can change the format a bit. Scott, you just mentioned that you put some new tools on the forum that you're sharing. That's one of the wonderful things about the Wappler community is it's a sharing community and a very giving community. I'd love to give you an opportunity to start things off by explaining what you did and what's out there, and then we'll get to questions and answers afterwards.
Sure. So every time I start a Wappler project, or previously every time I started a Wappler project, I really felt the pain of having to set up the authentication and authorization capability. The modules that are in there are perfect, but you still have to create the endpoints. You still have to create the UIs that connect with those. And when you're considering things like you want people to register for accounts, you want to log in, you want to change a password, you want a password reset, all of this capability is quite fundamental to every application. And for a while, I was kind of handcrafting these every time I was creating a new project, and I just got fed up with that. So I decided to find a way to write them once and then reuse them across projects. And so in doing that, I realized that I needed to create some web pages, some layout stuff, some CSS, some API endpoints, some lib modules, all these kind of different aspects that need to go into a Wappler project. I then discovered that a really nice way to do that was to have a Wappler project that is a Git project, and then you can use Git submodules to bring these additional folders into the main Git project itself. So I created a number of public repositories on GitHub, each of which acts as a different submodule, Git submodule for those respective API, lib, views, etc. Folders inside of a project. Put together an install script and an update script, put that on the main kind of a GitHub project. And so what that gives you is the ability basically to run a script, pull down into your Wappler project, your Git Wappler project, all these submodules, and then you're away nearly. There's a couple of things you need to do. It actually creates a security element for you, creates a mailer for you, but what it can't do is create a database for you. So you got to create minimum you need to do is create a database connection. You call it database, and then everything else just works because it's expecting that database to be there. And upon first login, it will notice that tables don't exist, and then it will offer to create them for you. So it'll kind of do a setup. There's a concept of a steward password that you put as an environment variable, which is kind of the main admin password that allows that gives permission for that database creation work to go on. And so it creates the tables, and then off the back of that, you've got a full suite of UIs and endpoints that allow you to do login, user registration, password resets, etc. And so things like sending emails, if you want to be able to send a registration validation email with a link that you click back to complete the validation, you just need to go into the environment variables inside of Wappler and just set some SMTP values in there, and then it'll pick those up and use those. If you want to use reCAPTCHA, there's 2 environment variables that are injected in there that all you need to do is put a specific secure key and a site key for reCAPTCHA, and then conditionally those UIs will see that those keys are there, and then it'll present the reCAPTCHA input for you on those forms. So for me, that's everything I have needed in that kind of user authentication and user authorization. Oh, sorry, there's one more thing. There's an admin console. So it's got the concept of a standard user and an admin user. And if you are admin, you can get access to an admin console that at the moment shows some high-level stats. It shows a log of activity. So everything is logged as well. Everything, every registration, every login, every logout, it's all logged in there. And it shows the last 50 entries. And it's got a few other buttons to do stuff. So the goal, when I have time at some point, is to make that far more advanced and far more just useful and interactive, but it gives me everything I need right now. So I use this stuff in my projects, and I built it specifically to be able to share, because if other people use it, maybe at some point they may want to make that admin console better, for example. And so I made sure when I was doing it from the start that I found a way to be able to share it, and ultimately that was via Git and GitHub. And that's why I've got those submodules in there and everything. So I wrote a post yesterday. I put it on the forum. A collection of you all have seen it and commented, etc. But if you haven't, please do go on there. It's called UserAuth. UserAuth, all one word, and it should have everything you need in there to have a look and have a play. Any questions?
The first one is, first off, thank you. That's amazing. First question is, when you start a new site, how much time do you think this saves you?
A huge amount, given the projects I've done in the past. You just bring up a terminal and you run a command, and apart from creating that database connection, within minutes, you've got a project that already has user authentication and authorization built into it, and then you just create the actual app itself, then, the site itself. So huge amounts of time for me, and hopefully for others.
You're talking about minutes or hours?
Hours. It doesn't take minutes to. It didn't take me minutes to be able to add all that capability in every time. It took. It was. We stepped into the hour territories there for sure.
That's fabulous. Would it be all right with you if I pasted the link to your UserAuth in the chat?
Yes, of course. Very welcome to.
Okay. Yes, excellent. Does anybody have any questions for Scott?
Yeah, I must admit, I somehow I didn't see this when you posted it yesterday. So as soon as you started talking, I did a quick search, found it, and I've got the YouTube playing on a screen, and looks really, really good and definitely helpful. I would expect probably half a day's saving just to get all of that done manually each time, even with the speed of Wappler. Because you've done it in Git, presumably as Wappler evolves, is it easy for you to update the repo so that your system evolves with it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so I've got it's a bit funky when you're using submodules, but I've got the project to rule them all on my laptop that allows me to make modifications across any of those directories, the API, the layout, the views, whatever, and then be able to check them in individually into their respective GitHub repos. So I made sure that I was able to keep adding to this project. What I will do is write some documentation for others to be able to do the same. That they can learn the lessons that I learned with all the submodule weirdness, etc. But I say weirdness, there's a huge amount of power there, but it's usually just one extra step for kind of making submodule stuff work, which is why I created those scripts. Those scripts do a lot of that work for you.
I should
answer the question.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I can see me using it fairly soon.
I hope so. I hope it brings value to other people. So yeah, that'll be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, just still on this, Scott. Is this something that you think George might pick up on and say, actually, we'll make this part of Wappler, or do you think it's something that probably would never, just because that's not the way they go, or it's easier to just keep it in a Git repo? And
so Oops, hang on. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Please don't ring. Right. So the answer to that question is, there's theoretically there could be a button in Wappler that could add this for you. Instead of you going down to a terminal and you're doing all the, just running the command yourself, there could be a button that could effectively execute the script. Obviously, it would be coupling itself to a GitHub project, and so from George and Co's perspective, they probably want ownership of that GitHub project, I imagine, to make sure it exists if they were going to have some form of coupling from inside of Wappler. But you could one-click this stuff, and that one-click could do updates as well. One thing I've learned from this exercise is that I've created UserAuth with all the user authentication and authorization stuff, but using the same structure, you can create modules for other things like accounts, like messaging. And so if you're writing a messaging program, so I've written a demo chat client, which is something I'm going to share with you guys in the future as well. But what I've realized is all the endpoints and even some of the UI components, you can package them up this way as well. So you can have them available such that if you wanted to drop some chat capability into any of your programs, you just install this other chat modules. I don't know whether to call it module or modules, because obviously it is a module, but it's got multiple folders because it has to spread across the API and the view and the layouts, etc. But what you can package up other capability using this approach. That's the thing I've learned. So that doesn't answer your question. That's an extra piece of information. But going back to your question, theoretically, instead of having to hop out of Wappler to get it installed, I'm sure there's something they could look at, even if it's some form of extension that you can add into Wappler to integrate this kind of external capability.
And I haven't spotted it in the post, but does this work on all the different server models, or is it Node.js only?
So obviously I'm a little bit, I guess, selfish in that regards. I've only really tested it on Node.js and Postgres because I built it for me and for my projects. So it may by accident work on other ones, but I certainly haven't had the time or the resource to be able to kind of test it out further than that specific technology combo.
Maybe we can do a shout out to other Wapplers that would be interested in doing exactly that, extending it to other platforms.
That would be great. And any feedback that I could have that could make sure it from the outset it's more generic, so it can be used in those other frameworks, then I'd happily take that on board. Because one thing that I am not is a Wappler expert. It does everything I believe I want it to do, and I keep learning new stuff all the time. So I'm certainly not an expert, but I appreciate what it's given me so far.
That's awesome. You had talked about having to plug in the environment variables. Is there a way to have create like a dashboard for it where you could plug in the environment variables in one place? So
I've thought about this, and as far as I'm aware, right now there's no means via an endpoint or any module. There's no means from your app to write environment variables back into the JSON object effectively that holds them. If there was, then you could have you could be part of the same UI. You could be able to configure those environment variables inside of the admin UI, for example. So as it stands, you've got, I believe, you're limited to just doing it inside of Wappler.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Still a major time savings and really speeds up development. That's really cool. All right. Well, does anybody else have any other questions for Scott? Now's your chance. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I think what you've done is absolutely amazing. I'm just saying that from a new person's point of view. That level of automation, in a sense, is incredibly helpful for a new guy. I'm coming from the HTML, CSS world, and then I go into this Power Platform, and I'm doing all this amazing stuff. In fact, Indeed and ZipRecruiter and Paychex all offered me platform partnerships. But the problem is, it's on Power Platform and I have no control. So then I find out I got to learn JavaScript, Node.js, React, Express, MySQL, and all this stuff. Wappler helps you learn too at the same time. Is what I've noticed is it's writing the SQL, it's doing all this stuff. And all the way, from Git, the repository, to Docker and DigitalOcean, this whole workflow. I'm just trying to unpack all this, because going from just HTML, CSS in low code to the real power is to be able to build it fast, but on the other end, to have access to the code to do stuff. So it's like this massive win-win. So I appreciate what you've done. It's going to help me a lot, I can tell, in the future, and I'm looking forward to everything that you do. One thing that helps me is when a guy just screen records the process and just does it, and then I can kind of it unveils a lot, because there's a lot of documentation you can create with any of these things. But when I watch some of the stuff that I've seen people, the community do, those kind of visual is incredibly helpful. If anyone ever gets inspired to record it as they launch, that would be incredibly useful to us, me, the new guy on the block. So thank you for what you've done. I'm looking forward to everything else you do.
You're welcome. So I had to make a call at one point. I was like, do I write the docs or do I just record a video? And I thought, from my perspective again, if there's a video, I'd much rather watch a video than troll through docs. Docs are essential. There's actually quite a lot of capability in there that's not exposed through the docs right now, because through any form of documentation right now, but there's a capability to override which endpoints are called, override which screens are redirected to, etc. So you can do quite a lot of like bespoke aspects inside of the UserAuth framework. And I will put that in some documentation, and I very likely will do a video about that as well. But I made a call. It was video or sit there typing docs up, and I made the video instead. So
Exists?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, if you look at the post on the community, you'll see the video.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, awesome, amazing.
And it's
wonderful.
only 9 minutes. So
9 minutes long. Yeah.
And the beauty of it is you can pause, go back to the bits that you need to see again, which is even better than going to a lecture or something where you leave and you think, oh, what did he say?
Yeah,
Absolutely. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, it's on the community post, you said?
it should be, or
In the chat, and it's on the original post. Here's a video tutorial that shows how to set it up. I'll paste that in the chat as well.
Oh, hey, awesome.
you're welcome.
Excellent. Well, Scott, thank you so much again. For what it's worth, one of the feedbacks I hear from the community is that one of the reasons they like the meetups and the videos is they just enjoy and learn from watching other people code, because there's more than Wappler's like the Swiss Army knife of development. There's hundreds of different, many different ways to do the same thing. So thank you very much for the video. And I think it was Winston Churchill that said that the UK and the United States are both two countries that are separated by the same language. And can you, what is your definition of bespoke?
Oh, custom.
Custom. Okay.
Yeah, so I've obviously there's some UIs there for login, for register, but I've built other apps that have their own custom login screens that still use the API, the endpoints, and just through overriding certain environment variables, once it's logged in and it's authorized, instead of redirecting back to, say, the index page, you can redirect to any other page you want. And if you come into any page which requires authentication, or either, then by default if you're using the authorize endpoint as part of the security in your page, by default it will redirect you to the login page. But if you override the specific environment variable, it'll redirect to your bespoke or your custom login page. So all that capability is in there.
Awesome. Very good. Well, thank you again, Scott. We'll look forward to your continued progress on this. This is awesome.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And when you're ready, if you'd like to present something to the community, or if you'd like to get feedback from the community, I would be more than happy to talk to you about making it one of the meetups. So we can reach out to the Wapplers and say, Scott wants your opinion, and you can get, we can get people on board, and we can have a meetup about it.
That would be perfect. If people can give me some feedback, I can address that, and then I can come back and we can have a good chat about it, and I can show some stuff.
Well, let's chat offline and see what we can set up. That's wonderful.
Sure. Thank you.
Awesome. Now, I would like to introduce John Stanton. I'm sorry, John Stanton from the UK again. John was the first person to do a Wappler meetup last May or June. Anyway, he was the first one. Did a great job demonstrating CRUD. It's a wonderful video. It's seen lots of views. And John is an expert developer. I got hundreds of sites. Yeah, yes, you are. And you have, especially new folks, have a question on Wappler. John would be a wonderful person to ask. And if it's something that John hasn't experienced yet, we can always reach out to the Wappler team and see if we can get you an answer. So I'd like to open up the floor for questions for John.
Can I just quick prerequisite? I'm definitely not an expert. I have been using Wappler since day one. I bought into the Indiegogo project when George first floated the idea 6 years ago, whenever it was, and I've been using the DMX Zone stuff with Dreamweaver prior to that. So once I saw what they were planning on doing and could see why they were planning on doing it, I jumped on it. I still haven't transitioned to Node.js, so there's no way I'm sorry. I appreciate what you say, Mark, but I'm not a Wappler expert by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm still stuck in PHP, mainly because I just started loads of projects years ago, and I've got to maintain them. And so, and I know where I am with PHP because I've been using it since 2000 or whatever. So it's going to be a really, really tough jolt to switch to Node.js, but at some point I will. So any Node.js questions, I ain't your man.
All right.
I think part of the problem, part of the problem with Node.js is just a different file structure, and the file system that it uses is a lot different to what you're maybe used to using with PHP, classic ASP, even .NET. It's just a completely different kind of full layout. So I think once you manage to get your head around that, it becomes a lot more easy to develop with, and then hopefully it should become sort of second nature once you swap between your PHP onto a Node.js project, and then vice versa. I think in your mind you'll have the file system sorted out, and you'll just be able to separate those from your train of thought, and that won't get in the way of development.
Yeah, because the actual fundamental use of Wappler is identical whatever server model you're using. So it is exactly that. I mean, I've got a DigitalOcean droplet sitting there waiting to be used, and I've got a mobile app requirement. So that's going to be where I finally get onto it, but I haven't yet. It'll come, and it'll come fairly soon. And then John L will breathe a sigh of relief because he's on a mission to I think eliminate PHP if he can.
What are you doing for your hosting, John? Do you use a managed server, VPS, or any cloud-based services?
Yeah, I run a company here in the UK, and part of our services is hosting. So we've got dedicated servers in Manchester and London, and that again is part of what's holding me back, because we've not got servers that are set up for Node.js, and that's a whole nother level of knowledge. Whereas I know where I am with your standard Nginx or Apache servers with PHP and all of that. And so, yeah, that probably is my main reason that I haven't switched. And
We
I've
use
yet to find an actual thing that Node can do that PHP can't, apart from sockets, WebSockets, which I haven't actually needed to use yet.
we use we're in a similar sort of situation. We use our own managed servers and data centers in London. We years and years and years ago, for reasons I can't remember, we went down the Windows Server route. But rather fortunately, it turns out that we've found that we're able to run Node.js, PHP up to version 8 plus now, ASP and .NET on the same server. So that gave us a lot of flexibility in what we did with our projects. It meant we could sort of cherry pick from all the best parts of all the best systems on offer, patched all together, which was difficult. But we found that as time went on, the Windows server satisfied the needs that we had in that regard. But I was expecting similar to yourself to be having a lot of problems when we transferred onto Node.js. But I found it's a bit of a lazy approach, but we use a Plesk control panel to specifically administer the Node.js part of the server, and it just runs perfectly. It runs absolutely perfectly. So you might want to look into that sometime in the future.
Yeah, certainly will. We've had Windows servers in the past, but Windows was never designed for web servers, so I realised its issues. So stopped probably 15 years, no, 20 years ago now probably. But I totally get that Windows has got that kind of can do all. Unlike Linux and whatever, that might be a little bit more contained or restricted.
I have a question, especially for the newer Wappler developers. We've got some talent on this call. Can you tell us what the top 3 problems or the top issues you face with using Wappler? Looks like Brian's getting ready there. Go ahead.
I don't know the top 3 problems, but I can tell you what I did run into in switching from this idea of a low-code platform to this powerful thing called Wappler, this nuclear weapon of someone called it one time. It's got this left and right side. It's for the new guy, and it's also for this highly talented developer. So the problem I had was, before I even start a deep dive in JavaScript and Node, how do I understand the complete workflow? And I'm talking, okay, I'm really good at HTML and CSS, but now I'm going to learn JavaScript, JSON, HTTP, Node, the database, the Git, the project, the security, the database, the deployment, the DigitalOcean, virtual machines, like all this stuff. There is no place on the internet that says this is a software as a service from start to finish. No one has created that. And it took me months just to say what I just said. And I don't know JavaScript, I don't know Node, but what I do know is I have to understand the full process overview before I know what I'm getting into in terms of what do I have to learn to get from this idea of I want HR, recruiting, onboarding, application in the cloud to a product, all the way up through. How do I, that would be the most powerful thing I could say that would attract people to Wappler, is just an overview of the entire workflow. Because I've spent weeks just figuring out, okay, you got Git, and then there's Git repo, and then there's right, you see I'm going, like this whole end-to-end workflow. Would it be so powerful? And maybe that does exist, but I just haven't come across it. And I'm still trying to unpack all this. Where does DigitalOcean virtual machines versus containers? When does the database need to be separated or in the virtual machine or container? When does this stuff, there's missing pieces is what I'm saying. So understanding this end-to-end workflow helps me put in perspective where I need to go do more homework throughout the project. So I just want to put that out there in the ether if someone ever gets inspired to create such a thing. The other thing that really helps is watching people build these applications. The one weakness that Wappler seems to have is there isn't a lot of videos out there saying we're going to build this application from end to end and deploy it. There's one or two out there, and if I could, I mean, that's what we really need as users is someone saying, look, we're going to take you through this whole project and you're going to see it. Because there's documentation on every one of these areas just out the wahoo. I spend weeks trying to go through all the DigitalOcean documentation, the documentation, and so on, all the way down through all this stuff. But the best way I've ever seen to learn for me is to watch people do it. So if there's any of those kind of projects where they're end to end, even if they're simple applications, if they use all the elements, it doesn't need to be high tech application. It just needs to be, demonstrating. I don't know if anyone else has found that. I'm curious what is out there. So if anyone has any comments on that.
I've found that there's a happy path that works for me from new project from scratch to deploying in a Docker machine, the containers, etc. But it took me a lot of attempts to find that happy path. I had to make a lot of errors and a lot of mistakes along the way. So I think you're right. I think there's opportunity for some video capturing, even with simple projects, just to show.
I'd be willing to pay for that quite handsomely, actually.
To show different people's happy paths from this is how I start a project and this is how I deploy it, and let me just sit down for 30 minutes and show it to you or something like that.
I think that is part of the fundamental. I think the biggest issue everybody has with Wappler is the documentation and the first steps. I spent months right at the beginning, and I was doing things, and I found myself thinking, right, that's working. Why is it working? I just could not get my head around why it was working. And there was, and I think in my whole kind of history of coding and whatever, there's always that penny drop moment where suddenly you think, that's what it is. And with Wappler, I found that it was a lot longer to get to that moment. And documentation is definitely its problem, its fault. And I know they're working on it. So Romy's one of the new members of the Wappler team, and she's specifically working on the documentation. She's not a coder or a tech person, but I think that's one of her main remits at the moment. So I think we're going to start. Well, they've already we've picked up on the forums the new documentation area, but it's all kind of in progress. So, but I totally get what you mean. And the other, it's almost a victim of its own success. They've put so much into it that someone who's looking at it for the first time today, I mean, I've had the advantage that when I started, there was no Git, there was no FTP, there was no database management. You didn't have any of that. And it's slowly over the last few years been added. And so I've grown with it. And so when Git was added, right, work out how they implemented this, but start using it. And now that's part of my day-to-day workflow. The database manager, I'm kind of using on and off, because again, it's the can't teach an old dog new tricks scenario where I'm stuck in Navicat for doing the database work. But I love the concept of what Wappler gives you, whereby you can have your local database and have your deployed database, and it will handle all the changes. So when you've added a field, or you've added a table, or you've changed a structure, you haven't got to think, oh, hang on a minute, what did I do? And do it on the live one. You just click a button and it does it. But I've not fully utilized that particular feature yet, because I think I possibly used it on day one when they first introduced it, and there were bugs. And you can't afford to have a bug when you're manipulating database structures. And so that just had me nervous. And I've remained a little bit arm's length with it. But Wappler does, I've not seen any other software that has so much built into its core. And as a result, someone who's coming at it new today with no knowledge of it prior to that, it's a daunting prospect. And anybody that creates videos for it, 6 months down the line, the video is obsolete because what they've changed is so extreme that people are now finding the videos are less help than not watching them at all, because the UI is all different, etc. And you see all over the forums people saying the fundamentals are the same, but yeah, it looks different. Or instead of clicking over here, it's now over there. We've been moving stuff from right to left over the last few years, where feedback from the community was saying, no, you can't have, I remember when flows first came out, and this whole concept of on the left side of Wappler was your server side stuff, and on the right side was your client side. And then they introduced features that actually was kind of almost on the wrong side and had you thinking, that doesn't make sense. And George would explain why. And then you think, yeah, okay, yeah, that does make sense. And you get used to it. But it's got so many legs now that it is tough. And I do feel for people that are coming at it for the first time today. And I've loved your idea, Brian, of a start to finish, create a new project, maybe the CRUD thing that I did last year, take it one step further back so that we're actually setting up a server, creating a database, whatever tables are needed, starting the project and doing that. And maybe an hour's video will get your application start to finish in its raw sense and be something that people would find useful. So I'd be up for trying to do that if I get any spare moments.
I'd like to jump in here if I could, John. I think that's an excellent idea. One of the things that I've noticed is as a society, we're all too busy. As Wapplers, we're even busier. There's just so much going on. I've done this with other organizations, is break things down into smaller projects. Brian, you brought this up. Can I impose upon you to reach out to me on the forums and put I'm known as Mark 1 on the forums, and put together a list. You have it in your head of what you'd like to see from soup to nuts, from beginning to end. And did you want it to include a contact form? Did you want it to include an API? Whatever you want.
Oh yeah, I have that.
Okay.
I've already got that list, so it won't take long, Mark.
Perfect. That's perfect. Send it to me.
Because I've been assembling this workflow as I try to unpack how do I get from A to B? How do I make a deployable and billable SaaS application from left to right? So I'm looking at the big picture much more than, because I can get into the weeds anytime. And yeah, I can learn all this stuff. I'm a mechanical engineer, but that list is incredibly important. And I will gladly put that together, Mark. Is it
A Mark and then the number 1. Mark 1.
Awesome.
I'm also going to put my email in the chat just in case. And then I would like to invite the Wapplers on the call, the Wapplers that are watching the video, because our videos do get hundreds of views each. And I will reach out to other ambassadors to I'll try to break this down into snackable segments and try to invite Wapplers to take a particular segment, and maybe we can find a way to put a series of videos together. And if we keep it small enough, we may be able to slay that other dragon. Is when Wappler does an update, we only have to update like 3 videos out of a 14 video set or whatever it works out to be. It definitely sounds like a worthy project, and we'll see what we can do about pulling it off. Does anybody have any other questions, or before that, I'd like to point out that Uh, our Wappler team has been, as far as I'm concerned, upping their game with the documentation. The latest using Framework 7 components seems to be really step-by-step screenshots of how to do exactly what we're talking about. But it's based on just using Framework 7 components. It seems very comprehensive. The screenshots are awesome. So Wappler's moving ahead with their documentation. It's really good to see.
So I sorry, I know I've done quite a lot of talking on the call, but you asked for 3 points. So I've captured 3 with regards to what let me just share them. So I find in Wappler that once the UI is sorted, you actually spend a huge amount of time on the right-hand side of the screen. And in fact, even more of that time is right in the bottom corner. So doing the plumbing effectively. So when I'm at that stage, I'd really like that plumbing work to be in the middle of the screen and not just me kind of staring down at the bottom right corner. I do understand that there's menus that pop up and then you go sub-menus, etc. But I like to work in the middle or the center of the screen. And when I'm in that plumbing phase, it's all down there in the bottom right. So I don't know if there's an answer here, but that's my first point to share with you.
Okay, awesome.
I would put that as a feature request on the forum.
Yeah, and that's an excellent idea. I will do that.
And be prepared that when they launch the feature, John's going to be concerned that he can't find it because it was moved.
My second point, I'm sure many of you have the same thing, but I'd love to have 2 projects open at the same time. That would be really useful. Mm-hmm. Really, really useful. So I don't understand. I don't know what technical limitations there are with regards to that. I know there's services and processes running in the background, etc. But that would be a game changer to be able to have that piece.
I think I've picked up that is a work in progress. So cool. I think that will be coming, but I know no more than that. Just picking up from the odd response in forums.
Awesome. That would be excellent when that happens. And number 3. I dare say many of you have experienced Wappler crashing on you multiple times. For me, I'm using it on a Mac. When it crashes, many of the times the process still exists in the background. So when I restart Wappler, the test server or the dev server, I can't access it. It's still running. It's still the port is still held by the old process. So I have to drop down to a command line. I have to else off and find the process and kill it, basically. It'd be nice to, I respect that the process might still exist, but I'd like a one-click kill or something like that instead of me having to drop down and find the process number and kill it myself. So that's my 3rd point.
That's an interesting one. Do you find it? I found it hasn't crashed for me in a long time. I'm talking probably months.
I've literally got a virtual desktop. On a Mac, you can go left and right. I've got one with a terminal window open in front of me right now, specifically for killing the process because it happens so often for me.
Okay,
I'm using a Mac.
A Mac, yeah.
I'm on a Mac. I'd reach out to the team and see if there's something going on there. But I found it's been incredibly stable for a long time now.
Nice, you're the lucky one. Yeah. Sorry, I think Christian wanted to say something.
Yeah, for me as a new user, there are some things that are very weird for me because when I started up with the new Ubuntu version LTS, and I thought, okay, let's go with PHP 8.2. And all the Wappler things are looking fine. And when I connected the database, everything was fine. But when I opened up my page, then I got a 500 and I didn't know what was happening there. And so I had to investigate, and there is no, I investigated on the forum, there was no advice that you can't use PHP 8.2. So that you have to go back and, okay, then I switched back to 7.2. Yes, there. I think John wants to answer something to that point. No, okay. And in the next situation I was coming was when I activated the email functionality on this Ubuntu machine. I didn't have SendMail on the machine, and I also got only the 500. And no one was telling me when you try to investigate the JavaScript functionality, you end up in a tralala, something about that. You cannot really find what is the reason why something isn't happening. That's a little bit difficult to investigate because there's no real debug functionality to find it. So I watched at the code. I know PHP programming, and then I created a PHP info file, and I thought, oh, okay, there's no SendMail. That's the reason why, and so on. So, but I think as a new user, and when you come to the platform, it would be helpful to have a testing script before you deploy your first application and get back the information that there's something on your machine that's not correctly set up, that you can't deploy there. That's something I would like to give to you as a feedback from my first steps on the platform. Yeah,
that's a really good point. I mean, the dev console should give you a good amount, you know, if it's trying to send an email and it hasn't got the ability to, but having a script that just runs through the kind of core stuff and gives you a just a list of installed, not installed, blah blah blah. Yeah. You know, if you want to use like some of the image manipulation, I've seen plenty of posts where people are saying, but I'm doing everything the instructions say and it ain't working, and it turns out, oh, you haven't got whatever GD or something on the server, so it can't. Things like that, yeah.
And what's also a big bummer you should never do is renaming. I think renaming and then restart the Wappler. I think it's the best thing you can do, so that everything gets refreshed when you rename your database connection, rename your mail server thing or something like that. It stays with the same names in the code, but it doesn't update the things. That's I think could be improved, but I'm fairly new to the product. I can't see anything right now. And what also would be good is I've tested a lot of no-code platforms and compared them. And sometimes you are starting with a platform and you're thinking about your project you want to make with your clients, and you ask yourself, will I be able to finish the project with that kind of no-code tool, or will there be a showstopper in the middle of the project where you have to switch all the things? And that the better the documentation and the better the feature list is showed to the customer, then you are able to have an idea that will fit or not for your project. Yeah.
I think where Wappler wins quite well on that is the fact that ultimately it's all code script files that you can
absolutely yeah you can do everything. Yeah, exactly.
So if you find it hasn't got anything natively, if you're doing it in PHP, you can write your own PHP script to do that bit. I'm assuming you'd do the same in Node.js if you needed to. Whereas I know a lot of people have come to Wappler from Bubble, where they've found it a really good system until they've wanted to do something it can't do, or they put their prices up. Whereas Wappler kind of, when people say what happens if Wappler stops to exist, what happens to my apps, that is a question fairly frequently asked, certainly by new users, and the response is, well, the code is yours. You can put it wherever you like, and you could edit it manually just using VS Code or something if you wanted to. I mean, personally, I'd be horrified at the idea, because I'm so used to being able to just go click, 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 and you've got this whole thing working. And to do it manually would suddenly take 10 times as long. But you could. You're not locked in.
All right, folks, we're coming up on the top of the, I'm sorry, please go ahead. There
Hi,
you go.
everybody. I do agree with everybody and everything you said, all your advice and your the way you could improve documentations and everything. Just I super agree with everybody. There is one thing that for me is important, and there is a real lack in Wappler. It's about mobile app. I think that there is something very important to add on the documentation. I don't know that's for me. It's my first time working on a mobile app, and it's very difficult to understand how to use Wappler to build a mobile app.
I've been asking for a long time for
Sorry for
someone.
my English. I
Your
understand
English is
everything, but
excellent.
I don't speak very well.
Your English is excellent. Yeah, I found for a long time just wanting someone who's either built a mobile app or one of the Wappler team to create a 30-minute video of getting just a very, very simple app that gives you little more than a screen with maybe I don't know, a table of records, maybe the CRUD thing on a mobile app, just so that you can see the process. Because things like you can't do an iOS app if you haven't got a Mac. Things like that, people just don't realize because they see Wappler, it's a one-click deploy for Android and iOS. But if you're on Windows, you can't do the iOS. And so yeah, I think they seem to be in fits and starts. There'll be suddenly a lot of focus on mobile, which we're seeing at the moment with Framework 7 and the various updates that they've done recently. But then you go a year where mobile is barely touched on. And yeah, so I totally get. I don't know, Mark, does George sort of watch these recordings? He came to our very first one. But I just wonder, this feedback, because I'm obviously not, I'm just a customer like everybody else.
In the past videos, we've always been presenting something. This particular video, there's tons of feedback, and I will make sure that George is aware of that and bring it to his attention. And I think you folks have put together some have contributed some really good information he's going to want to hear. Go ahead, Brian.
Hey, Mark. One thing I was able to do in Power Platform, because of the way they have that Power Automate, was using APIs to extend incredible amount of power to an application. For example, we've got 3,000 employees in 600 locations and tons of recruiters. And so what it allowed me to do was I integrated directly with Indeed and ZipRecruiter and background checks to completely automate those processes. From what I can tell from Wappler, the ability to work with APIs, I could do a lot of that stuff inside of Wappler also. Is there anyone out there that's done some more advanced API stuff where there could be demonstrations of, Wappler to me there's an incredible amount of power at your fingertips. Google Maps was the only application that I've seen somewhat used to demonstrate some API capabilities, but I have a feeling that there's a lot more out there that could be done with Wappler, because I know in the HR world, posting to job boards, we've got hundreds of jobs being posted daily and taken down daily. And I built one interface that just the director of recruiting can see the entire company and what's going on by posting. And not to mention, by the way, that ZipRecruiter gave us a 25% discount by becoming a platform partner on $2 million spend. So you can see that's a $500,000 savings. We can also completely automate all the background checks. So the API goes out runs a background check and then tells us with signals in the dashboard whether or not this person is of any concern. Well, if you've got hundreds of people being hired a month in doing all that onboarding, it's really nice to look at one dashboard and know, filter it down to where the concerns are. If you're a VP or up there. So, and even the dashboards like Power BI and all these other Domo and many others that could be used with other applications. I could just see it's almost limitless what could be done with Wappler if you, once you, it's like, it's just.
Yeah, it is unlimited potential. I hear you. But I'll tell you what, Brian, we're over the 1 hour mark now, and we try to keep these to about an hour so that they're actually watchable for folks. Why don't you add could I impose upon you to add the API to your list?
Sure.
Of a basic app. I think that in today's day and age, I think that's a critical component. And I believe, and John, I couldn't find it on the forum, there was Me Being Ken put together some training videos a while back. I think it's one major revision back. It's been a year or so.
Yeah, I think it's more than that. I think it's Wappler 4. So you're probably looking at nearly 2 years ago.
Time flies. But
yeah.
There was some, Me Being Ken had some, in the forum, had some videos, and it included a simple API. Now that I think about it, he had some custom, no, scratch that. He had some custom work to go with to make that work. Anyway, Brian, if you include the API in your list, please send a list along. I will reach out to the forum and see what I can put together, and we'll see if we can help folks out with that.
I think
Awesome.
I think what you're thinking of. I think what you're thinking of, Mark, was part of that training was two-factor authentication, which probably used an API.
It did, but he had a custom module that he put together to make that work. So I'd forgotten about that. So, but anyway, we'll see if we can get that included in some kind of video. And I would encourage you folks to keep an eye on the forum. If we can break these things down into small, snackable areas, maybe we can make some progress going forward. So I want to thank everybody for participating today.
One quick thing, Mark, sorry. I don't know if people saw it, but this morning or today, a new featured site was added of a sports news feed. That would be all APIs. So reach out to Dorian Gray, who developed that. Might be a good person to say hi to. He's got feeds coming in from all different news outlets.
Awesome.
It looks like that's basically what his site is. It's just a mash of it all.
I'm going to put that in the chat for you guys to pick up if you'd like.
I don't think your chat messages are reaching us, Mark.
Okay, folks, it's time to say goodbye till next month. It's the first Friday of every month, 4 p.m. Netherlands time. Keep an eye on the forum. If you have any ideas, suggestions, would like to present something, please reach out to Mark One on the forum. And I hope to see everybody again next month. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.